Good evening and welcome to the Manydown Overview Committee. We have some new faces and obviously I'm a new chair, so please forgive me if I don't get this quite right. I have some lovely ladies who have promised to kick me if I get it wrong. Where are we? So, housekeeping first. There are no fire alarms scheduled for this evening. Therefore, if the fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the building immediately. The fire exit is located at the side of this room. Exit through the reception and meet in the War Memorial Park. This meeting is being webcast live on the internet and will be available to view on YouTube after the meeting. Is that webcast on? Yes? Excellent. And please switch your mobile phones off or turn them to silent. Thank you very much. Do we have any apologies for absence or substitutions? I don't think so. I think everybody's here. Magic. Okay, here's the important bit. Do we have any nominations for vice chair, please? Anybody? Anybody? Don't all rush to the front. Okay, we will leave that for next time. Oh. Excellent. There we go. Councillor Lee?
If she is okay with it, I would like to nominate Councillor Diane Taylor.
Oh, sorry. I have to remember the microphone. We have one nomination for Councillor Diane Taylor. Are we all agreed that Councillor Taylor should take the vice chair position? Excellent. Thank you very much. You can stay there, that's fine. I shan't make you walk. Okay. Do we have any declarations of interest this evening? No? Fantastic. And any urgent matters anyone wishes to bring up now? Excellent. This is going very well. So now, because some of you are new to this committee, only Councillors Taylor, Compton Burnett and Councillor Lee were present at the last committee meeting. So can any of you confirm for me whether the minutes of the meeting are correct and you're happy to agree them? Thank you very much. Okay, main business. So to start with, Andrew Reynolds is going to provide us a brief update and overview on the project, and then I will ask Councillor Cubitt to introduce the report.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, members. So all I've done this evening is just to provide an overview of the Manydown programme. It gives you an insight into the current work. Manydown's got a fairly long history, and I'm not going to bore you this evening of that long history, but I know there are several other people that have got a lot of knowledge on this that are not in the room. So I think, this is just to give you an insight into what's going on. There are some elements that will be covered in the report, and I will wait till we get to the report to deal with some of the more detailed matters, but obviously we'll go through the presentation. We'll then ask Councillor Cubitt to do the introduction of the report, and then we'll pick up any questions following that. So just in terms of structure, I'll talk about we'll explain what the programme is, a little insight into the team and who we are. I'll then pick up Manydown North, Manydown South, and then the Manydown Estate. So as a reminder, back in 1996, we signed a 999-year lease with the Manydown Company for the land that is shown in the dark purple at the top, and then coming down to what we call Parcel 6A and then Manydown South. So that is the land entity that is referred to within the 999-year lease that we have with the Manydown Company. The land at the very bottom, called the SMV site, which is the Society of Merchant Venturers, is a separate landowner, and I'll explain about how we're working with them as part of the wider, what we call Southern Manydown. So for the purposes of our relationship, the land ownership is jointly held between Hampshire County Council and Basingstoke Council on a 50-50 basis. So the programme is made up of a number of elements. As I've explained, we have Manydown North, which really is focused at the moment around land drawdown. the coordination of investment into the development vehicle, the relationship with the joint venture partner Urban and Civic, who we procured back in 2020, and then the sort of onward planning works that is now happening by Urban and Civic and managing that relationship with them. So that's one particular work stream. We then have Manydown South and Southern Manydown, which is the ambition around promoting that part of the development site for the local plan review. So that involves us as the landowner taking that forward as part of the wider planning of the area, looking at the infrastructure, the viability, the engagement with communities, and then what the type of delivery vehicle that will be required to deliver development on that location. And that's all part of the promotion. That's presuming we get an allocation in the next local plan. Alongside that, we then have parcel 6A, which is, if I just go back to the site, which is the land in between north and south. So it's just south of the railway line. That land remains allocated in the current local plan. It was not brought forward as part of the outline planning permission that we granted because there were issues with, at the time, with Five Ways Junction. So that piece of land was held back. However, it is in the current local plan. And it has the capability of delivering circa 500 dwellings on that particular piece of land. The challenge that we have is whether or not a railway crossing is required in that location between north and south, and what that railway crossing is required to deliver, whether it is a full vehicle crossing, whether it's a public transport and walking and cycling route. So we are in a discussion at the moment, both with the local planning authority and the highway authority, as to what that crossing needs to be. So until we have determined what that crossing is and where it needs to be, it is more challenging to then bring forward development on parcel 6A, but it is something that we are looking at, and I'll come back to that. So parcel 6A will become important for us as we think through what the next stage of development will be for Manydown. And then underpinning that is what I call and what we class as a Manydown estate. So we have the 999-year lease. We have a 35-year farming business tenancy on what we would classify as land outside of the development site and on Manydown South. The development site, as most of you are aware, is currently being farmed, but that is being farmed temporarily. The councils have got full possession of that land, and we took the decision earlier this year that because of the timescale for moving forward with the freehold transfer, that we would put or we would seek with the Manydown companies put a spring crop in there. That would both protect the current position on the land and minimise our cost in maintaining it, whilst bringing in an income for leasing that land temporarily to the Manydown company. As a team, we have one of the project sponsors here. Sue is project sponsor from Basingstoke's end, and then jointly with Hampshire County Council, Gary Westbrook is their director, that is also the project sponsor from Hampshire's end. From my perspective, I report to Sue, but I also obviously have a dialogue with Gary in terms of the senior management of the programme. Below that, we have a direct team that works with me to deliver the elements of the programme, and that team is jointly funded between Hampshire and Basingstoke. So the cost there is all shared 50-50, and we draw on corporate support services from both Basingstoke and from Hampshire. So it's a team that comes together as a core, but also drawing in the corporate support on the relevant sort of legal, finance and procurement services. I thought I'd just share with you, again, key partners, because people often think, who do we work with? Who are our key partners in this work? So clearly, Manydown Company is a key partner for us in terms of being the freehold owner, but also we have to obviously partner with them in delivering the farm business tenancy and what will happen to the land in the future. Hampshire County Council, both as joint landowner and as the highway authority in particular. From Basingstoke's perspective, it's a local planning authority. They're key to the work that we do. Urban and Civic / Welcome Trust, obviously Welcome Trust now own Urban and Civic, but obviously we still treat with Urban and Civic as they are a separate entity within the group structure of Welcome, and they are a partner. Homes England are a general partner in both in terms of providing strategic advice and funding into the project. And then we have at the very far south end, the Society of Merchant Venturers, and their land steward is Savills, who we work with closely in terms of Manydown South. So those are our key partners. We clearly have a range of other sort of stakeholders in terms of the parish councils, some of you as ward councillors, and the residents who we obviously have previously engaged with, certainly on Manydown North. So there are a range of other key stakeholders that we work with, but in terms of key partners, those are the main ones that we work with on a sort of week-by-week basis. Just as a quick reminder, Manydown North has got outline planning consent for 3,500 homes, and through that there were a range of matters that the planning consent dealt with. So we dealt with the provision of 2 primary schools and a secondary school, range of community buildings, countryside park, looking at safe cycling and safe routes that access schools. Small businesses, so there are some retail centres or sort of small centres that will provide retail and some commercial activity on the site, as well as obviously significant open space and green spaces. So that was the construct of the outline planning consent. Urban and Civic are working to that, and I'll come back to the first phase in just a moment. And again, I think it's just worth reminding people that what we sought to achieve and what we still aim to achieve in terms of those benefits. So significant development value that can be attributed to this, and that in turn brings benefits back into the borough in terms of construction, production, construction jobs, and therefore those jobs creating expenditure within the borough as well. So really important in terms of what this, once this begins development, the opportunity to realise those other benefits that will come from having the construction underway and then eventually the new homes being built. So in terms of our sort of current position and what we do as a team on a day-to-day basis at the moment, firstly we have the outline planning permission, and now that is transferred essentially to Urban and Civic as our development partner and development manager to start delivering, and they have started to deliver on that in terms of dealing with the site-wide frameworks, some of the issues around the junctions that they're bringing forward for reserve matters, and looking at the construction access and getting the permission for the construction site access junctions. So there is a significant amount of work that is going on in the planning world. It's just that visible from outside is very little, but that is what is currently happening. We have our, regular joint venture session now with Urban Civic. So the board meets on a 6-weekly basis between the Manydown Garden Community vehicle and with Urban and Civic. So the parties come together and meet to obviously oversee the matters relating to getting on with the planning and the delivery of Manydown. We're currently in a position around land drawdown. We'll talk about that and explain a little bit more about that in a moment, and around the current status. But ultimately, we have a draft outline business plan, which is overarching in terms of the whole development. We have a finance model that obviously we've worked through extensively to be satisfied with, and we also have a key phase 1 business plan, which sets out the first key phase, which we'll come to in a moment. As I've said, we've also set up and had operating for a number of years now, the Manydown Garden Communities LLP, which is the relationship between Hampshire County Council and Basingstoke and Dean Borough Council. So that's a separate arm's length vehicle that will eventually hold the land. So when we acquire the land from the Manydown company, that will be transferred into the Manydown Garden Community. So that entity will then manage development activity with the development manager. So we won't be selling that land directly to Urban and Civic. That land is always held by the 2 councils, but in a separate vehicle. And as the development comes forward, we will release development parcels for development, and then the income or the revenue generated from the sales of properties will then come back through the vehicle. So that's in simple terms, the structure that we're operating in with Urban and Civic. So Urban and Civic will never have that land ownership. That is always retained by the councils. It was always a key principle back in 2016, 2017, when this structure was set up about the councils holding the land asset. In terms of planning, as I said, there's been a fair amount of work undertaken on the site already. So we've undertaken archaeology works. To a point at this stage, there's still further archaeology digs that need to be undertaken, but there's been a complete look at the site in terms of archaeology. There are some other locations that have been identified for more detailed work, and that will be undertaken later this year. Urban and Civic have been progressing what we call a site-wide framework, so it's the next tier of documentation that's required to take forward with the local planning authority. I think all but one document is now agreed with the local planning authority, which is quite significant progress in terms of having those all signed off and discharged as part of the Section 106 agreement. We've got the construction site access planning permission now. That was granted a couple of months ago. So in terms of being able to get into the site and start having the construction works undertaken, that will be formalised and created once we have the freehold transfer. We've also looked at the main access site. So this is the site on Winklebury Way and Roman Road. So they've just now prepared the reserve matters to come forward on that particular junction. The reserve matters just deal with the engineering works that are required to deliver the junction. The junction itself was approved as part of the original outline planning consent. This is just dealing with matters that relate to the engineering of that particular junction. The second junction on the B3400 and dealing with the realignment of the road, again, is being worked on, and we're expecting that proposed reserve matters to come forward to us in the next month or so. Urban Civic have also been working with SSE in terms of the energy supply to the site, and have secured the energy supply to the site in its totality. So again, that was an important part to de-risk the site going forward in the future. Further works have been undertaken on Main Street, so the main street that runs through the site, and there's quite a detailed dialogue with Hampshire County Council Transport team in the design of that street. So we're waiting to see the final proposals of that of Main Street coming forward, which I think we're all waiting to see in terms of how that's being designed up. And then the first key phase, so I think the next slide. So this slide illustrates what we call the first key phase of development on Manydown. So ultimately, we have the first key phase off Roman Road and Winklebury Way Junction, and there will be 5 parcels of land available for development, together with the location of the first primary school and the countryside hub, which is shaded in grey just before you get to the countryside park. So that will be the first opening of the site, very quickly followed by the second opening of the site in the south, which again are 4 main parcels, shown between 3 and 4 main parcels on that particular location. So they will open up in 2 fronts. That's the proposal. So the idea is that we'll have sort of different neighbourhoods being developed on those sites. So there won't be the same builder, same contractor doing development across all of it. There will be parcels that will be offered up to, or we'll be inviting developers to bid for those parcels, so that we can have a spread of spread of developers on each of those parcels. So the key actions that we are working through at the moment, and we'll come back to the Manydown company, is finalising how we acquire, commencing our sort of due diligence around the work to complete a transaction, but importantly, resolving the outline or the overarching business plan and key phase 1 business plan, which officers are doing at this point in time, looking at how we prepare a cabinet report ready for a final decision, and then working through how we transfer the site into the Manydown garden community. So that's really quite key to us at this point in time. Moving to Manydown South, and again, this committee's received a number of presentations and updates in terms of the work. So Again, as part of the original acquisition of the site back in 1996 and the rationale behind that, it is important that the councils continue to promote that site for development. So that's what we've undertaken now. We've essentially almost concluded the council's direct work on the north, albeit we continue to have a client management role on it. The team are sort of beginning to turn their attention to the south and how we promote this. And going back probably 6 or 7 years ago, there were dialogue with an adjacent landowner called Society of Merchant Venturers, and we began to sort of explore what development could look like on that western edge. So over the last probably 3 years, we've begun to evolve that thinking into the plan as you see on the right hand side, which is just an illustrative, and I stress illustrative, master plan at this point in time as to what we could do with development in terms of Manydown South and the wider southern Manydown. And this is about how do you create a strategic plan for the next 30 to 40 years that looks at the infrastructure as a whole. And one of the dialogues that we've had with the local planning authority is, yes, you could do it piecemeal, but your infrastructure will be piecemeal, and ultimately that is not a good way to deliver development. So actually looking at the whole and having a red line around the whole would mean that we can plan properly to deliver infrastructure across that whole site. And I think that goes to the core of understanding how you deal with movement and connectivity, how you deal with the green spaces, how do we deal with the phasing delivery of the homes and the community buildings that will sit around them, how do we deal with the phasing of schools. And we all know, and I won't go into the debate today, but the issue around secondary schools is a really big issue, and certainly that's one of the factors that we've had several debates with the Education Authority about delivering housing across all of Manydown, but also on Manydown South and Southern Manydown. So those are really key issues. The other key issue that we have in relation to this particular development is the potential for where the future of the hospital might go. And again, most people are aware that the hospital are looking at several sites. One of those sites is down on Manydown, or on Southern Manydown, on the Society of Merchant Venturers location. And if that were to come to being in terms of the preferred location, then that will have an impact in terms of how we deliver infrastructure in that location, because the infrastructure down there is not capable of taking this scale of development. So a lot of it will need to be upgraded to accommodate both the development and for any future sort of medical hospital facility down there. I've spoken briefly about Parcel 6A, and again, that's key in our thinking in terms of how we bring this forward, because 6A has to work with the wider planning of Manydown South, so it can't operate in isolation. Similarly, we have to work through what we do with the rail crossing. And then the other key component is then the delivery option. So just so that everybody's clear, when the councils went out to procure a partner for the north, it is just a partner for the north. So Urban and Civic are procured just to deliver the north. There is no requirement for the councils to offer up Manydown South for the contractual arrangements with Urban and Civic. So we can still do and decide how that is then delivered for Manydown South, which is important, because obviously time has moved on. Our obviously learning in terms of and experience in terms of Manydown North has been important, and our reflections about how do we make sure that we can move more agile and quicker to deliver on the south is very much at the forefront of our minds. So clearly we're looking at sort of different delivery potential options for the south as to how that could come forward. And then the last bit, and again, has been a point that's raised, and I won't sort of dive away from it, is Old Down, because Old Down again was part of the original acquisition of the site, and Basingstoke and Borough Council acquired Old Down that would provide a potential access into Manydown South. Now, clearly over the years that has changed and has become an area which has important habitats, it's important ecology in that area. So we have, as you will see from this current master plan, we have not taken any view of having any route through Old Down as part of a transport link. We have a relationship with the Society of Merchant Venturers in terms of having the access coming through their land and out onto the A30. And that's been really important in our thinking. But ultimately, in terms of protecting our position, and you as the Manydown Overview Committee as the sort of the landowning side need to recognise that at this point in time, Old Down, if we were not able to get a route through the Society of Merchant Venturers land, could still be an option at the end of the day. Now, no one is proposing that we do that, but that has to be a position that we reserve until we're satisfied that we can deliver a route through down onto the A30. I accept it's contentious, but I think we're not planning that going forward, but it is a position that if there was a really major problem, we would need to bring that back for discussion. So that, again, just to give some context in terms of that delivery across Manydown South, as we sit here today, so some of the work that we've done, we could create a further 8,600 homes across that, but it is over several plan periods. This is not just in the current local or next local plan period. You would create a population of around 19,500. We'd have a mixture of district and local centres. There's the opportunity for the health campus, which we've identified and would obviously see as a really important anchor if that could be secured. Importantly, though, across all of that are the countryside corridors and green links, so the strategic gap between Oakley and the development is crucial, and we've spent a lot of time looking at that, and that's still under part of the landscape work that we are doing. But also that link through Old Down, how do you connect that importantly across the other green spaces and countryside corridors. So again, we've done a fair amount of landscape and environmental work to look at how do you create the green spaces within that type of development. Importantly, we have focused quite heavily on public transport links through the site, reflective of where Hampshire's transport policy is and how do we make sure we have strong walking cycling routes, again connected to the countryside corridors, having a main spine that is predominantly public transport led, so in terms of car traffic movements they're moved to a fringe through a road that goes around the periphery of the development, not through the centre of it. So again, we make the attractiveness of using public transport the number one priority rather than the car. Now that is a challenge because we all know how wedded we are to our cars and some of the rural challenges of people, but that shift is really important. So it's how do we create that important visual around public transport being attractive, being efficient, being effective of moving people both within the development and beyond into the town centre, to the railway station and beyond. It clearly has an employment zone opportunity, so much greater than Manydown North. So again, we've been looking at what sort of employment could go down there. Mainly that would be on the Society of Merchant Venturers land, purely and simply because that's close to Junction 7, and therefore making sure that you put employment close to the main arterial route and network. And the last part is looking at potentially a heritage park on the on part of the Battledown Farm ancient monument. So there's a very large area that's a scheduled ancient monument. We cannot build over that, so we have to look what do we do with that area of land, because clearly it will remain fallow, and therefore there's an opportunity to do something a little bit different there. So there's different ideas at the moment. Or when we were doing this last year, we thought, could there be some form of urban farm or heritage, making use of the asset that's there. But it is very early thinking. There is no plan as yet as to what would happen, but it is trying to come up with different ideas as to what you do with that land. Just as an illustration, again, we've done a lot of technical work around to support our promotion of the site. So we've looked at both climate change, transport. We've spoken about green infrastructure and landscape, water and utilities. So all of those, we've had significant dialogue with people like Thames Water and SSE, with Natural England. So those are all key people that we're working with in terms of just doing the technical evidence base to support the promotion of the land. So currently our key actions and the work of the team are looking at the ongoing engagement with both the local planning authority and the highway authority. We're completing some further work around landscape and foul water, so we make sure we've got a foul water connection. Review of delivery options. So again, as I said earlier, we are looking at sort of beginning to scope out what those delivery options could look like. How we develop a plan for Parcel 6A and progress the work around the rail crossings. So those are all key activities that the team are looking at the moment. And finally, Manydown Estate. So we do have a ongoing and regular dialogue with Manydown Company. So I meet with them on a monthly basis. The team also meet with them on a bi-weekly basis to deal with estate issues, because we do have issues on the estate. So it's really important that we have a strong relationship with them. We're also just beginning to look at how we better use assets on the land. So across the whole estate, there are a range of assets. Actually, how do we make better use of those assets? So there are farm buildings, there are other farms on Manydown South. There are issues to do with biodiversity, so how do we work better in terms of farm management and farm stewardship? So again, opportunity to work better and more efficiently with the Manydown Company to deal with some of those issues. So we're beginning to look at that at the moment. So key for us is maintaining that dialogue with the Manydown Company as we go forward. That's a quick overview of what is a very complex programme. I'll pause there and we won't sort of go for questions yet, but I'll pass over to Councillor Cubitt, who will formally introduce the report, and then I can then pick up any other matters. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrew, and good evening, committee. That was really an outstanding synopsis of where we are, and I commend all the work that's been done. I think that was extremely clear and comprehensive. As you all know, I've only recently been made a cabinet member, of which this falls under my area of responsibility. And I've got a lot of learning and catch up to get up with to speed, but I have been singularly impressed with everything that I've been given information on to date. So what we're here tonight to do is you're being asked to consider and comment on the scope and the content of this report. And we really value the comments and the queries and the questions that you're going to raise on this report to feed back on the progress and where we're heading. So I very much look forward to you going through the report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions for officers or the Cabinet Member? Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks, Andrew, for another wonderful update. I think you're just updating slides now just to make sure that we're all staying on track as things progress along. I do have quite a number of questions, so if anyone else has got some, please do put your hands up, and I'll just give you all a bit of time to talk. Just wondering, no Urban and Civic tonight. Is there a reason why they're not attending?
First meeting of this new committee, I think we wanted to give committee members just an opportunity for us as officers to engage and start the ball rolling with the new committee. So there's no other reason than that. We recognise that they play an important part for you to be able to challenge them and discuss with them the key issues for the North, and so we will be bringing them back in at future meetings. But for this one, it was just really to get the ball rolling for the new committee.
Brilliant, thank you, understood. So as I said, I do have a number of questions, some pertaining to the report and some to your presentation, Andrew. So if I start with the ones with the presentation. So on the map, the kind of the key phase map that you've got for 1A and 1B, it shows the parcels of land on 1A, including the school, the primary school. Whereabouts in there was the land, because it's part of 1A, I believe, the land for the secondary school was part of 1A. Am I correct? And where would that sit within that parcel?
ultimately, there is discussions going on with the Education Authority, but the focus initially is to sort of resolve the primary school, and there's been a lot of work done with Education Authority to determine both timing and location. Clearly, timing is linked to the Section 106 agreement, but again, the dialogue with Urban and Civic and the Education Authority has been really important to then understand from a planning perspective where best to locate that school. So originally, we had it in a slightly different location, on the master plan, but I think the discussions and what's sort of come through is to have the primary school adjacent to the hub or the countryside hub because of the opportunities to engage education within the countryside park. So I think there's been a much fuller and better discussion with Hampshire Education Authority to relocate it, well, not to sort of adjust the location into that area.
Thank you. That makes perfect sense. You know, especially, I know my kids like playing around in the woods, so the closer they can get to the outdoors, the better, I think. So I did have, I guess, a further question about the secondary school, but you've confirmed that the conversations are ongoing around bringing forward the secondary school. I know Urban and Civic, after having conversations with them, they are quite content to build one. But obviously, we're all well aware that it's Hampshire County Council's responsibility to decide if they do want one, which, you know, hopefully that can be pressed enough so that we do actually get one on that side of town. I'm a bit wary of asking this one. It's around the merchant venturers land, and I believe you confirm that you're having a good dialogue with them as to the land that they own, so that we can gain access to the A30 from there.
Very, very important question in terms of the access through there, so that we don't get held to ransom. And yes, we have a very constructive dialogue with them. I think there's a variety of land equalisation arrangements that we have broadly discussed at the moment because the type of development. So neither party would want to hold either one to ransom, and we're proposing to work through an agreement with them in terms of setting that out, so that we have a formalised arrangement, so that we have access through their land. But we do have a good relationship with them and a good working relationship, both with the Society of Merchant Venturers as the trustees, and with Savills, who are their land agent, in terms of developing a sort of almost a joint team to promote the site.
I think Councillor Dillow was next.
Yeah, obviously, the red line for me is it's basically making sure that Old Down isn't an access route. I believe that the council unanimously voted a motion through to give it LNR status. So that doesn't seem to be progressing well. And is that because you're in discussions and dialogue with the merchants to discuss other alternative access routes? Because obviously that area needs to be preserved. It's an area of outstanding natural beauty, and it would be a travesty if that was lost.
Just to reassure members, I think firstly there is we're not using it as a bargaining chip. Let's put it very simple. I think we have to, as the landowner of both a joint landowner of Manydown South with Hampshire and the landowner of Old Down, and recognising when that was acquired what its purpose was for, we have to be cognisant that it was providing an access route into Manydown South. Now, we have sought to avoid that given the sensitivities around that land. So it is not something that we are raising as an issue in order to promote the land. As you'll see from the master plan, we've deliberately avoided it and actually contained it within, so we have more other plans that look at both the environmental and the landscape connectivity that brings that all into sharp focus. But what we have to recognise is as we go through a local plan process, if the Society of Merchant Venturers land was not allocated and remained farmland, then we could not seek to put an access through there. So we would have to look at an alternative route. And that then brings us back into the question, is that then Old Down? And therefore, I appreciate the concerns, and I'm only raising the question because I probably know where the answer would go, but we would have to make a decision as a council in terms of our landowning of Manydown South and the development there and the access route and the original purpose it was bought for. We can't answer that question tonight. I know there's been conversations and legal advice sought around this whole issue, and therefore I know Tom Payne is taking that forward, but we have spoken, and there is internal dialogue between officers just to make sure that, and as officers we have to protect the council's interests, that we don't trip up and find ourselves being challenged if we suddenly do something to Old Down that could affect that access point when we haven't resolved fully where the local plan will take the overall future development.
Thank you. Councillor Taylor, I think, was next, please.
Yes, thank you. Could I just talk about parcel 6A, which is an interesting little bit of land? First of all, you said that it would accommodate 500 houses. Is that as it is now, as a triangle of land? It's not huge.
Yes, that's how much we believe it would take at this point in time, and probably with a rail crossing, but we've got that work to do to determine how much land take a rail crossing would require.
Okay, so that comes on to my second point, that obviously the rail crossing is just a red X, but the implications are absolutely huge, not just for the land to the south, ploughing through parcel 6A, but to the north as well. I mean, it doesn't specify where it's come from or where it's going to. My question is, do we have to have a rail crossing at all? I know that we're talking about connectivity between the two, but do they have to be connected? They're huge, discrete communities. You know, Manydown North is 3,500 houses and Manydown South is even bigger. Do we need to connect them at all? And can we not keep parcel 6A as a sort of amenity land, almost like a buffer between the two? I mean, I don't know, perhaps a little park or something. And also, having lived around Oakley for so long, I know that that the railway lines along the edge of that parcel of land 6A is a train spotter's paradise, and it would just seem such a shame to take it away. It really would. I mean, the view you get of the Flying Scotsman flying through would be absolutely ruined with houses and crossings and everything there, and I just wonder if it's actually worth it at all.
Good question whether we need it, and that's a question that we have also both asked ourselves and asked that of the local planning authority and the highway authority. So we are partly in the hands of the local planning authority because they may determine that a crossing is required, or they may determine that a crossing is not required. We have looked at in advance of any request, if there was to be a request, how that might get delivered or where it might be located, but only at a high level at the moment, at a feasibility level. So that is it's a good question. We haven't got the answer to that. That answer will no doubt materialise over the next 12 months as we go into a Reg 18 process with the local planning authority. In terms of its use, then it is identified and allocated for housing. So it is part of the council's housing provision, and therefore I think we would be expected to bring it forward for housing, not least because the Manydown company would also expect a return on that land. So from a commercial perspective, we have to understand that we would need to get a return out of that land if we were going to put it across to amenity, and that would be quite a significant cost to the council without getting a return for housing. So I think that's a challenge for us to think about, but I don't think it's going to be an easy one to overcome because of its status in the local plan as it stands at the moment.
So I mean, I don't know the process at all. It's been identified. I mean, can it be unidentified in the sense that if the Manydown company allow it? And of course, these places, I mean, I know we've got the countryside park, but, you know, it's another bit of open space that would be quite valuable for the people living there. Can it be, you know, I mean, presumably it's up to us in the end if we unidentify it. Oh.
It would be up to the local planning authority to
Okay.
change it.
Okay.
Not down to us as a landowner to change it.
Okay, I'll go to them. Thank you.
Sorry, thank you. It forms part of the housing supply numbers, which I think would challenge the local planning authority in changing anything, any designation at the moment. But it's not a landowner function that we can change the local plan allocation.
Councillor Lee, I think, was next, and then Councillor Tuck. Councillor Tuck first. Thank you, Councillor Lee.
Thank you. I was really just going to pick up on the railway crossing. I was going to ask you the who, what, how, when and where. It sounded like you were saying that you were looking at that within the next 12 months, or, I mean, that if you are exploring that option, would we not look at reaching a conclusion fairly promptly in order to understand, do we or don't we?
Again, a really important question in terms of the timing. So as a landowner, we've looked at the, if required, would it be an over the railway line or under the railway line? We can effectively do both. And so from that point of view, we understand the principle that we could achieve both, although Network Rail prefer an overbridge. They do not like you going underneath the railway line because it potentially disturbs the tracks. And in that location, because you've got the track coming up from Weymouth and the track coming from Salisbury, there's quite a lot of electronics there, and they do not like those being destabilised. So the challenge for us is working out, could we get it underneath and would it be more practical versus going over, but going over means that it will be highly visible. And therefore that's quite a challenge. However, the dialogue with both the local planning authority and Hampshire County Council as a highway authority has not yet yielded a position where they have demonstrated there is a need for one, but they have sought to ask us whether or not we would provide one. And that's still an ongoing discussion at the moment, which we need to have that resolved as we approach a Reg 18 position.
Exactly. Thank you very much. That's very helpful. I've got a second question, which was looking back through the old papers. We've got a 250-acre park, which is wonderful because to see landscape scale habitat restoration is fantastic. And I saw that you'd had an ecologist, botanist, and various surveys done. Could you just tell me, clarify for me what the costs of that were so far, and is it possible to have sight of that plan? I haven't rummaged very far, but is it possible to have a look at that plan, please?
I don't have the cost date off the top of my head in terms, so there's probably two elements there. There's the work that the councils will have done going back probably 4 or 5 years ago in what its conceptualising of a country park was going to look like, and there were obviously some work done to support the outline planning application. Subsequent to that, then Urban and Civic have brought in their own experts in terms of developing the countryside park brief, and that entailed a number of people looking at what they see could be done with the countryside park. So that work is sort of still in progress at the moment, but those papers wouldn't have been shared with the committee. I think in some of the presentations, Urban and Civic have explained what they're doing with the countryside park, and I can certainly extrapolate that information. But at this point in time, I don't have what the councils have spent off the top of my head at the moment, but I can supply that.
That would be great, both of those. Thank you very much.
Councillor Lee, did you have any other questions?
I've got multiple questions, Chair. Sorry. Can I just quickly return to Councillor Dillow's point on Old Down? And I understand that there's the considerations trying to get onto the A30 in case anything goes wrong with the Society of Merchant Venturers. Have we had any discussions with those that are developing on Hounsome Fields? Because that just seems like an ample opportunity to shift that just in case to a roundabout that's already connected to the A30 and through a parcel of land in similar size to what Old Down is. Has that taken place?
So we have not had a direct dialogue with them, but we do know that there is a potential access route through. However, the developers have retained a 2-metre piece of land, which is they would hold us to ransom. And that ransom would cost a significant amount of money to overcome. So that's our challenge. Now, there is a complex, there are ways round this in terms of how we deal with Old Down, the access through the Society of Merchant Venturers land, and how that access route comes in, and the role of the Highway Authority, as they do have compulsory purchase power provision to obviously acquire land for highway purposes. But we're not at that stage yet. I think, and again, I just want to convey back to members that we have a lot of regard to Old Down in terms of the environmental importance. We have not designed anything. There are no designs in any of our folders that put a route through Old Down. But I need to reference it because it's important that you understand, as the land-owning side of the council looking at and overviewing what is happening with Manydown, what those issues are. As I say, it's not to say that we want to change that, but it's important that we acknowledge it and that we have the opportunity to discuss the issues and come to a position on it if we need to. But that's if we need to, not that we have to. And I think you would and rightfully expect us to exhaust all other options first before coming back with saying, well, we've got an issue here, which is what we would do. So that work, is very much live. But as I said, I think in essence, it will evolve through the local plan process at Reg 18. And at the moment, all of our thinking has been done to connect the route through the Society of Merchant Venturers land out onto the A30. That's the most obvious route. Taking it through Old Down is not an obvious route unless there is a significant issue at local plan stage.
Yeah, just interestingly, since I've been in situ and gone through a lot of presentations on the Manydown, not once has Old Down been mentioned. So, I mean, whilst Andrew's raising it tonight, it hasn't been on the radar at all, unless I've been deaf, dumb and blind. So I think it's fair for him to raise it, but it's certainly not integral to any of the presentations from any senior member of the officers in the council.
Okay, do you have any other questions, or Councillor, is you okay for Councillor Compton-Burnett to ask her question first?
Please go ahead, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. A couple of questions. So the first one is going back to schools. I think that we're all aware that there's a big struggle getting school places now. And it would be really helpful to get a briefing from Hampshire County Council about what are they thinking about Basingstoke schools, primary, secondary, now the future. When are they going to take a decision about whether we're going to get a secondary school on Manydown? How big is it going to be? What talking are they doing with the schools in Winkelbury particularly that are very worried about opening primary schools when they've just reached the point when they're sort of breaking even, and they really don't want another fancy school right next door that's going to take their pupils. So please could we get a new briefing from Hampshire? And the other question I wanted to raise is about traveller sites, because this is the first time I've seen where the traveller sites might well be, and it would be very helpful to know when is it, what sort of dialogue there is and with whom. Who are we talking to in the traveller community? Who are we talking to? Who knows about how best to create traveller pitches that work with a good neighbourhood community and good relationships? Because obviously that's right next to some existing houses, and there'll obviously be concerns, so we need to make sure that we make it as good as it possibly can be for everybody.
I'll just pick up the school point. I think what I'd recommend, it doesn't, the schools generally for Basingstoke wouldn't come under this committee. So I think...
Same thing, we have to make a recommendation to one of the other committees in terms of having a look at that.
I mean, I've written down here that I've already requested to meet the key parties, and at the moment the only party I have met were those when I chaired the meeting, which I had to chair within a week of being made cabinet member in Winchester, of the Manydown Garden communities, of which the county council's an equal party. But I think your points are very well raised, and I would absolutely like to ensure that we have a meeting with Hampshire County Council regarding education.
So I think it's a recommendation to either EPHS or EP.
I think it's essential.
I happen to agree with you. I second exactly what Councillor Compton-Burnett says. I personally have said for ages, we have no real need for another primary school on Winklebury, anywhere in the Winklebury vicinity. We've got primary schools in Buckskin. We've got 3, so 2 on Winklebury, 1 in Rooksdown, and they're all very, very good primary schools that are like just about up to capacity. At the moment, we are desperately in need of a secondary school. We have all the kids on Winklebury have nowhere to go. They're walking across town to go to a secondary school. It really, the secondary school is so important. It's one of the questions I still get asked when I'm out and about in the community is, when are we getting another secondary school? So it really is imperative that we push it somewhere. Even if we can't bring it through Mock, then it needs to come out somewhere, because it is a major priority for Winklebury residents.
Now, I hear that loud and clear, so I will take that back to the Cabinet, and obviously we'll talk with the senior management, but I absolutely understand where you're coming from. I think I agree it's key.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you on that. So in terms of traveller sites, so that, yes, there has been so it's been fairly quiet around the traveller site issue for Manydown. It was quite an issue several years ago. We spoke at length with Urban and Civic about the location, and I think the previous cabinet also had an input into the sort of preferred location as to a travel site, because we have to provide 5 pitches on site. It's not about providing off site anywhere. We're required to provide on site. So there has been discussion just south of the Worthing Road as a preferred location. As yet, there's only been a little bit of work done by Urban Civic, but I can ask for an update. I agree with Councillor Compton-Burnett. You know, the or how we handle the provision and then management of those sites is really important. And I think it gives us an opportunity to think slightly differently as they're being provided through the joint venture. But ultimately, they have to be delivered within the next 3 years, I think it is. So I will be getting an update from Urban and Civic on that.
Again, on the point of the traveller sites, what I would like to take away is where we have a really good example of a traveller site that works, that is in our ownership already, or a borough or the county can demonstrate like gold standard and learn from those, and I would like to see that fed into the information. Thank you.
Chair, could I just add into the discussion on traveller sites, would you mind?
Certainly, that's fine.
We're having this discussion quite closely now on the Hanson Field site, because it's happening just as we thought it would. Obviously, the developers don't want these sites. Well, you know this because you're on the committee. So we're having to look really closely now again at what meets everybody's needs. We're stuck with a planning policy that says they've got to be integrated, but we've got a gypsy and traveller community who probably don't want to be integrated. The developers don't want it to be integrated, and the people who are going to live in close don't want. So it's just a complete mess at the moment, and I can see that this one is in a similar, right on the edge of things sort of place. and it's neither one thing nor the other. So if we could have a sort of holistic discussion that isn't just about Manydown, but is about Hanson Fields and some of the other developments that are coming up, so that we really know what we're aiming for, that honours and respects the travellers community, but it's, you know, it's not just like following some do-gooding policy that nobody wants, I think, anyway. So, yeah, let's have a big discussion and not just a little Manydown one.
Chair, can I also add in,
Yes, yes.
please? It's just to follow on. So we have to bring that, the reason why it's on the map is because it's part of phase 1 work.
Right.
And is that because of the stipulations of the outline planning permission that it came forward as part of that? Because from my recollection, and maybe I'm just remembering things, I'm now over 40, so everything seems to have dropped. Yeah. I was under the assumption that the traveller site was supposed to be on the sort of the western fringes of the site, of the original site. Has it been moved because it has to come forward quickly?
So there was no designation in the outline planning as to the location of the Gypsy and Traveller site. There was a lot of discussion around where it shouldn't be, and therefore we were mindful when we went through the outline planning application, just in terms of explaining that, you know, where an appropriate location might be for the site, but we never designated any site in the outline planning. I think, as Councillor Taylor makes very good references, that if you talk to the Gypsy and Traveller community, they don't want to be in amongst houses. They like their own space, but clearly they still need access to the community services and facilities. And it's how do you plan that properly? And I know we have done some work with Urban and Civic on that. Where it's located or identified at the moment, I think if we were to turn around to Urban and Civic and say, actually, no, you've got a chance to review it, they would review it. So it doesn't have to go in that location. That was something which came up previously. And I think, you know, if you as members wanted to ask Urban and Civic to, as their view, I wouldn't say go away and do a lot of work on it, their view as to a location, they may well come back with a different view.
Thanks.
Sorry. I think, as Andrew's alluded to, part of the location was obviously part of the previous administration's thinking. So again, we need to retest it through the new administration as well. So there is an opportunity to review this position.
But bearing in mind, I'm sure all of you are aware, I mean, there are very extensive statutory obligations that we as a borough have to adhere to.
I do think it's fair, Councillor Compton-Manette made a fair point, is do we actually speak to representatives of the traveller community, or are we second-guessing them? Because I do think it's important to have views from the traveller community about what they need, because there's no point us building something if they're not going to use it because we've built something that's not serviceable to them. So I do think we need to be taking opinions from there as well.
Thank you, Chair. I would endorse that. I think I did originally, when we were going through the outline planning stage, we did do some research. We spoke to not the Gypsy and Traveller community directly, but to representatives or groups who represent them, and got some further feedback in terms of the types of location development that they would like to see as part of a developed traveller site. We have relayed that to Urban and Civic. I think it's not been on the top of their agenda at this point in time, but I think given the discussion tonight, I'm more than happy to raise it with them and to open up a further dialogue around that, because they will be thinking about that. So, and again, if the current administration wishes us to have another look at location, then we can ask Urban and Civic their view. I don't think we would ask them to go and commit lots of money in terms of designing something just yet, but I think in terms of a view, then we can ask them to go away and do that.
I think the point is that we don't know where the best location is. I'm not saying this is wrong. We don't know where the best location is. And also, I don't know if Councillor Cubitt mentioned that it's the management of these sites. If it's just sold off to a private owner, then, you know, we could have another situation like we had up at Peak Copse. And I talked to the Gypsy and Liaison officer at Hampshire, and he said, it's got to be well managed and it's got to be not mixing families. And we just need to somehow hold on to that control, I think.
Probably one of the benefits of having the joint venture partnership is that that both Sue and I can take that back in terms of the management of the future estate. And if that's something that's quite key, then we can discuss that with Urban and Civic. I think you're right, in terms of private sector management, it's quite poor. There are other organisations similar to housing associations that provide better management of those type of sites, and it may be somebody like that that we would ideally like Urban and Civic to come forward with a proposal of. So I think there is some further work. Let us open up the dialogue with Urban and Civic just around their current thinking of the site, what their thinking is that sits around it, because they will have been doing some sort of broad thinking, and let us bring that back for a further discussion.
Councillor Lee?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, sorry, I still have a ton of questions. I do apologise.
Don't ever apologise for questions.
I'd like to go back to the country park. It's something that's been raised in multiple mocks. Councillor James was a big advocate for this question. Have we decided ownership yet of that country park? Because just like him, I don't want to see this like shrugging shoulders. It's not my responsibility to get things sorted. Passing the buck between here, Hampshire County Council, some private developer. I think we need to really sort of nail that down as we get closer to this delivery.
Thank you, Councillor Lee. Yes, it's an important question again. No decision has been made because it is slightly premature at the moment, but it is one that is critical to the Countryside Park strategy, which MOC will receive in due course once that's developed, and part of that will begin to set out the options for delivery. So again, the assurance from us as officers is that that won't be just a decision taken at by the development vehicle. That is something within the contractual arrangements that is enshrined, that is a decision by both councils. So you will get the opportunity to input into that when the time is right. So we haven't reached that point yet. We're still probably a little bit away from that, but the future sort of management of the countryside park is really critical to, and has been a thread throughout MOC for the last 5 years. So, be assured that that paper will come back in due course. I think we probably, I have got it on the forward plan, which we'll come to later.
Thank you, Chair. Just to follow up on that. So is there a difference between this strategy that you're talking about, the countryside strategy, and the countryside park development brief that's been completed and the condition discharged as part of the Tier 1 paperwork?
Yes, there is a difference. But some of the information from that countryside park brief will come into the strategy. But that really is for performing a planning function at this point in time. It doesn't set out the how it's going to be delivered. The strategy will set out though the way it should be delivered, and that's something that we will want to approve before it goes anywhere. So yeah, be assured that there will be some similar information in there, but ultimately the strategy is a document that you'll be signing off.
Oh, Councillor Dillo?
Councillor Compton Burnett raised some interesting points about the need for a secondary school in Manydown North, and I think there should be some sort of joined up discussion about the needs of the houses that will be built in Manydown South, and if there isn't an access route between Manydown South and North, then there may be, in my opinion, a danger that the secondary school wouldn't be built on Manydown North, because obviously Manydown South is possibly 3 times the size, and if there isn't access or direct access to the secondary school for the people that live in Manydown South, then there may be a decision going forward in the future that the land that is just allocated at the moment in Manydown North could be used for housing, and then a secondary school is further delayed and put into Manydown South where the larger number of houses are. I just wonder whether that could be looked at so that they look at joined up the movement of people going into and the needs for that secondary school where it is hopefully being put in Manydown North.
Thank you, Councillor Dillo. I know there has been, I think there still is, discussion in the County Council looking at the provision of schooling across the western side of Basingstoke, certainly secondary schooling, and I agree with the point that we may need a connection in order to ensure people can access the school between north and south, depending on where it's going to be. I think at this stage, all that I can say from the landowning side is that we've made provision on Manydown North for secondary school. That was agreed with the Education Authority, provision within the Section 106. So that at this point in time is what will get delivered. However, I'm conscious that there are other discussions that are going on to say that isn't sufficiently big enough for to be a sustainable secondary school, so therefore what needs to be done to make it sustainable? I don't have the answer to that. I think that's the conversation that needs to happen with the Education Authority when they come in and have a dialogue. So I think that's a question really for them to pick up in terms of what their thinking is.
Anybody else? Or are we... Oh, Councillor Slimming.
Thank you. Apologies, I'm going to ask a question that goes back to the planning that was allocated in outline December 21, I think, before I came on the council. The types of housing, you talk about drawdown, and you've got several developers who are already being worked with to produce the housing. I think it will depend on the type of housing as to type of how many children you might need to allocate to school places. In my experience as a governor of a school in Tadley, the number of children this year entering school at 5 has considerably dropped. I think an awful lot of people thought that there would be more children with various things happening in the world, but in fact there is a total across the country. There's a lack of children of 5 coming into the system. I don't think people appreciate that it will not last like that, because obviously if they don't have 1 year as a bad year, they're in future years. So it will be interesting to talk to the county to see the projected figures. And depending on the types of houses that are going to be built, presumably the types of expectation that the children are going to be needing primary schools. If it's a starter homes, for example, that's probably going to be a younger generation. If you build a new school, you don't have to fill it immediately. You can bring it in at the bottom of the year and gradually work it in, because I do think if you don't plan for the infrastructure of 3,500 homes on phase 1 and potentially an awful lot more on the south, you're going to end up in the situation. I mean, we don't know if the county are suddenly going to find they haven't got any money to build a second primary school, for example. You know, things do happen, things do change. People tell you they're going to build hospitals and maybe not. So again, I think it is good to have that plan that there would be a school there, even if they don't actually take a full complement straight away, that they gradually move through the ranks, rather than find that the schools that are already in Winkelbury and other places will in fact suddenly have a bulge year and they won't have the places for it. So I think
we've got to think a bit more strategically, perhaps, than what is there now. Have we any idea what types of houses we do expect to come forward? Because obviously, if we don't know the developers yet, we don't know exactly what they're going to build. Have we any idea of what the plans on the drawdown are?
We do. We set out in the outline planning a mixture of homes that we would expect to see delivered on Manydown, and that is what Urban and Civic are working to. I don't have the precise breakdown to hand. I would need to just go back and just sort of set that out in a follow-up to that question to you. But we do have a structure in terms of both from 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, 3 bedroom and 4 bedroom units. I think some 5 bedroom units on the site, so there is a mixture and quantum of those different types, and 10 years, of course. So I can respond to that question back to you in writing as part of that.
Thank you. I could, in fact, probably go and find the original outline planning, but I didn't do that before I came to the meeting. Apologies.
But, Councillor Slimon, I think your point's well made, that it has to be well thought out, and the ebbs and flows of the needs have to be built and baked into the system. So I think and also, I mean, interestingly, I was involved in the bus trip to Alconbury many moons ago when Urban and Civic were pitching, and one of their central pitches to us as members was that they built the infrastructure first, and they showed us a school that they built before any of the houses had been built. So, yeah, thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Lee?
Yeah, and just to reiterate, on the conversations that I've had with Urban and Civic, they are more than happy to build a school. Absolutely. It's just Hampshire that we're waiting for. Right, where do I start? So, Manydown South, you mentioned about sort of building a perimeter road so that you're talking about walking, cycling as an internal function, trying to get people to commit to getting out of their cars, which is going to be a tough one in Basingstoke, I think. And the reason why I say it's going to be a tough one is because the way that the town's been designed, and certainly the public transport that we've currently got, does not lend itself to people jumping on a bus quickly, getting to the other side of town, or hopping on a bike. The only time I've cycled on the main roads in Basingstoke was during COVID, because the roads were empty. I daren't risk my life on those roads sometimes because of the number of potholes. I know that's not we can't sort of do anything about that because that's HCC's responsibility. But what conversations can you, as officers, have now to ensure that when Manydown South comes to fruition, that we have a decent, sustainable public transport that can get us from Manydown North at the top to Manydown South at the bottom, without multiple bus trips, without waiting hours on end, on a Sunday having to catch the only bus in the morning at 11 o'clock and coming back at 3 o'clock. I think that's really important to be thinking now.
Interestingly, only in the last week or so, the Gary, who is obviously my equivalent at Hampshire in terms of sponsor for Manydown, has sought to put Andrew in touch with a chap called Frank Baxter in terms of looking at all the highway requirements across the entire site. So actually, it's been very fortuitous that actually we've managed to effectively re-engage that relationship with Hampshire in terms of having the very conversation you've just mentioned.
Can I just add to that though? Yeah. It's good that those conversations are going on, but that's to that site. We're not talking about the wider bit of Basingstoke where, if people can get in and around Manydown, great. That's one step further than we are. But actually, we want to talk about how can we get people out to, the Chinham Business Park, to Viables, to the hospital, to anywhere within the Basingstoke and Dean area, really.
So I think it's probably fair to say that it is, whilst we'll have a conversation with him about Manydown North and South, he's obviously doing the entire transport strategy. So this is about feeding into that overall piece of work. So at a relevant point in time, they can certainly come and have a conversation about it.
I mean, that
Can I
would be-
make a point just quick? I have to agree with Councillor Lee. Now, I travel on the buses because I don't drive, and I can tell you they are not fit for purpose. The amount of times my son's been late for school this year is terrible, and it's all because of cancelled buses because they haven't got enough drivers. The system, if we want to encourage people to use the public transport system, we have to improve the public transport system, because at the moment it's just rubbish, and I wouldn't use it if I didn't have to.
No, I mean, I hear this from everybody, and I completely agree that the provision of public transport in Basingstoke is not great, and it's essential. And I think if we're going to be developing with a view to not having people in cars, but I would also add, just in terms of the green narrative, that if we're also actively encouraging people to drive electric cars, we can't then say we don't want people in cars. There's a little bit of a contradiction there, but I mean, you do need a proper public transport provision, and it's essential.
Can I help, Chair? We discussed yesterday about what might be coming forward to some of the committees, and you know that I'm the chair of the CEP committee. I think transport was one of the issues that we brought forward. I think there will be something coming up where we can have an opportunity to look at the wider thing, not just in Manydown, but perhaps the wider connectivity. And the the local cycling infrastructure project, walking project, I know they've been looking at connectivity within the town, and Sustrans have come up with quite a lot of ideas of actually linking the town in so that there is a proper system in the town and bringing people outside. I know that, for example, things that will come out from the north, from where I live, into the town will all link in. I think when we see those actual plans, we might be able to see there's a little bit more structure coming forward from the county. And obviously, I'm sure when CVP discuss it, we'll talk about other issues as well. But we will bear in mind that Manydown is on there as well.
That's very useful, thank you. Do you want to cut in?
So I was just going to add, obviously, in terms of the remit of Manydown, what's important is that the infrastructure that comes forward fits into that wider plan, and therefore that's why that conversation is so important, because obviously we would look to make sure that we're trying to fund as much infrastructure as possible through the development of Manydown itself for that area. That's not going to pay, obviously, for all the infrastructure across Basingstoke, but what we want to make sure is that that is facilitating the wider aspirations in terms of the highways sort of functionality.
Chair, can I just add in as well that it's also about the types of housing that we bring forward as part of that development. You know, I live in an area where there was the aspiration to get people to move towards public transport, you know, greener modes of transport, and actually because that wasn't there, you know, we now have an estate that gets overrun by cars parked on pathways, you know, on corners, and we need to make sure that the housing is also suitable, you know, as a fallback. And I get that we need to also think, let's not build it so that people can park 10 cars on their drive, but also at the same time, I don't want to see 100 cars parked on the road.
So again, that was a big issue when we went around Alconbury, which Urban and Civic did, and I made references to certain parts of this town and where we have recent buildings which have not accommodated real needs. And I think that'll come up in the visual when we do, but we haven't seen that yet, have we? And I'm passionate about beauty. And within the beauty concept, there has to be wider roads that can accommodate the real world, not a computer-generated war game.
Councillor Compton-Burnett.
Thank you. You were talking about employment opportunities, and I just want to check, are we having a good working relationship with BCOT and Queen Mary's and everywhere else that might produce boys and girls that can help with the construction and that can start getting a big intake that will then go forward and be able to help with, you know, long term with building Manydown and the houses and, you know, so many different skills they'll need.
Yes, I mean, Urban and Civic have got a community partnership officer that is specifically engaged with people like BCOT and working through what, both in terms of how they can provide opportunities through courses, through to apprenticeships. So that work is ongoing. Again, we can request an update as to the progress of that for the next meeting, so that you've got that in for the next meeting.
Again, that was a central part of their pitch back in 2016, that they would provide us with extensive location to train the trades that would be needed for the significant building works. So I very much look forward to hearing where they are on that. And I hope it's progressed to more than a few conversations with Tony Bravo.
Yeah.
Councillor Slimming?
I'd just like to ask one question that probably nobody's going to answer. Do we know when the first properties will be ready for people to live in?
Can Andrew, can I just ask, rather than answering that question, could we have an update of the land drawdown? But not tonight, I think, because that's key to that question.
So I was just about to respond to the same thing, because obviously there is a timeline that will kick in once we've actually completed the land drawdown process, so we can bring that back as part of that update.
Sorry, Chair, I don't feel that it needs to be brought back. If we could just have, I'm very conscious that at the last administration was a lot of just updates for things. If we can just have it sent out as part of an email or something rather than.
So obviously at the current time we're in the throes of the actual commercial negotiation. So we can certainly supply what we think the timeline is from the point of that being agreed. We can provide that update, but what we can't do is give you an update at the moment, certainly not by email, in terms of the commercial sensitivities around the negotiation.
The reason I ask the question is that I know that a lot of developers nowadays, you know, they get the option to build and then they don't necessarily build. Have we got anything within our agreements that actually say there is a deadline when they have to be finished by or not?
Can I pick that up? Yes, within the contractual arrangements then, we're very cautious in terms of how we will release land to developers. So we will not be allowing them to take the land and then just sit on it. There are certain levers and mechanisms within the contractual arrangements that will compel them to deliver. Clearly, if a developer was to go bankrupt, then we would take back through necessary action the land. But no, there's always those risks in development. But ultimately, we do have a framework that compels them to deliver.
So there's compelling evidence that smaller house builders are much more likely to build out as fast as possible because they can't afford to sit on. And I think that will be factored into absolutely who is successful in accessing these parcels going forward, because it's in all of our interests that the build out's as quick as possible. In terms of the success of the land drawdown, I can assure you that as soon as an agreement has been reached, you will be notified.
Sorry, can I just add to something you just said there about smaller house builders? Can we also look at, within that, local house builders as well? I'm very much an advocate for trying to keep that business, you know, locally, so that they then spend their money locally rather than it kind of being pushed out away from the town or the borough.
So obviously there are certain procurement legislation that obviously we have to adhere to in terms of how we undertake the procurement. Obviously through the development vehicle with Urban and Civic, there will be obviously an appropriate process that we go through. to, once the sites are being allocated, drawn down and sold on for delivery. But in all aspects of that, we are trying to promote, not just with the sale of the land, but also in terms of some of the works, in terms of contractors, etc., on sites. We are trying to promote local sourcing, if you like, of activity.
Can I also just make a point? You said there about getting the houses built as fast as possible. I do think we need to be careful that they go up reasonably quickly, but not too quickly, because if they go up too quickly, it means they're cutting corners, and that means that people are going to live there are going to have a lot of problems once they've moved in.
Not necessarily. There are fantastic new building things that you can actually build off-site and bring them in and construct them within, and it's been proved that they're perfectly adequate, and many councils have done that. So I think, you know, it depends if the right people doing the right things with proper acceptable building regulations, etc. I think some things can be built. I think we're all thinking of prefabs. They were all built after the war as a short-term measure, and many of them, people are still living in them, and the war was a very long time ago.
Interestingly enough, I was actually speaking to Martin Heath from Greener Basingstoke this afternoon at my son's cricket match, and he was talking about modular housing and how it can be made quite ecologically friendly, which I know that this committee has said before that we're quite keen to push for a high standard of eco-friendly homes on Manydown. So it's certainly something that's worth looking at.
If I could just add, I don't want to be part of an administration that's seen to be cutting any corners or building properties that are not fit for purpose. So I hope, and I'm sure our officers have no intention of permitting that either.
Anybody have any other questions? Councillor Lee, have you finished with your list of questions, or do we still have more?
No, Chair, sorry to the committee, I do apologise.
And then,
so
right,
I'm actually now on to the report now, so...
You have one question, and then Councillor Ashfield can have a question, and then you can talk some more.
Councillor Ashfield hasn't asked a question yet, so she can...
Okay.
Is it a question? Is it a comment? So I kind of came along here tonight thinking, oh, how much value can I add, because I'm a new member to this. And quite by chance, I got up this morning at 5 o'clock and walked from Whitchurch to Basing View. So I've done a little bit of research that I probably hadn't given myself credit for. So looking at the PowerPoint, the countryside corridor, green links, mature woodlands, absolutely, this site has got it in spades. Absolutely fantastic. As a walker, and that's something we absolutely want to be encouraging, absolutely need public transport, but that leaving the, let's call it the Manydown site, and then hitting the boundary of the town, coming through Kenilworth Road, was stark as a walker this morning. And perhaps it's because I'd already done 13 miles of a walk before 9 o'clock this morning. But I don't think we can talk about this without talking about Manydown, without talking about Winklebury and the experience of getting into town from this site. I was grateful to be walking in June at 8 o'clock in the morning. Would I be doing that in the dark? Absolutely not. And I appreciate we perhaps don't want to increase the scope of this project, because I know it's really, really critical to get this over the line. But I suppose I'm surprised at how little we refer to Winklebury, because I don't think we can talk about one without the other.
We do have as part of... Sorry, we do have as part of the Manydown, but not part of the Manydown, is there is a Manydown to sort of Basingstoke cycle route that's being put in by Hampshire County Council that's going to go from the entrance that's being built all the way through. And maybe it's a bit presumptuous to ask, you know, where we stand on the new bridge that might go across the dual carriageway, because we know that there's the bridge that links kind of Oak Ridge, Norden and Winklebury, just by the football pitches, is not suitable to take enough people across. But yes, I think that's already partially considered. I mean, there's a lot still to do in terms of the back of the playing fields, but part of that will be addressed with this new improved cycle route that's going to get put in place, and it's already been approved and agreed that it's going in. It's just timings, I think.
And if I may add, also as part of the discussions we had last night in terms of what's going to go to the other overview and scrutiny committees, certainly the cycling and walking will be part of one of the future papers that goes there more generically.
Just update in terms of, Councillor Lee's quite right in terms of asking for an update on the bridge. I haven't got an update in terms of where the county have got to on their funding. Just to remind committee, there is in the Section 106 agreement for Manydown a contribution of about nearly £3 million towards walking and cycling to connect it with the town centre. Part of that is the route through Winklebury, something which this committee supported back probably 4 years ago when we embarked upon the feasibility and then handed it over to Hampshire to then carry on with the delivery. So this committee has been very much pushing for that link well in advance of the outline planning. So it is now good to see that it's coming forward in more detailed design, but there is still a question mark over the replacement of that bridge deck connecting across the dual carriageway. So again, I'll get an update from the County Council on that.
And Andrew, can I just confirm that you guys are still supportive of the bridge option and not what county put forward at the last update, which was to drop us down onto the road and crossing the road?
We've been a very strong advocate of that, and I think it's something that we've pushed hard to ensure that is still part of the plan, because if the bridge deck in its current form remains there, people will continue to use it. And we've tried to convey that position back to the County Council so that a new bridge deck is funded as it's fundamental to that proper crossing.
Councillor Ashfield?
It's kind of supplementary, but I think the other thing that I would say about this committee, and maybe this is a discussion for the work programme, but some of us are new to this and some of us are obviously very, very, very involved in it, and I think we all want to participate as much as possible. I would like to suggest, if it's possible, either formally through the chair or something that we do as a committee, that we take a site visit so that we can actually look at the map, visualise it, and I think if we need to be adding value and to this, and I think that would be a really, really valuable thing to do to be able to make as much benefit to this discussion.
So, Councillor Ashfield, I think it's a great idea. And in fact, in my new capacity as cabinet member for major projects, I'm walking all the sites with one of the senior officers. And I think it'd be fantastic if you guys also did a site walkabout. And I'd love to join you as well to hear your views. So that's a great idea. And I'd like that to be followed up. Thanks.
I do like that
Please
idea.
do it while the summer is here.
We'll put it in the work programme, but as a member of the DC committee, I know the value of site visits. It's sometimes a lot easier to visualise things, and sometimes you really have to get a look at things. So, yes, if we can arrange some sort of site visit, that would be fantastic.
And also, I think your point on connectivity is pivotal. So I hope I think you're the chair of EPH, aren't you? So you will be the person running that paper, which is great, and hopefully we'll get Hampshire County Council come to the meeting, because that's one of the things that I've always been very frustrated about in the last 15 years, is we often have discussions about Hampshire County Council, but they don't come to the meeting when they're discussing their papers.
Chair, if I could just suggest that we will arrange that with Urban and Civic. And then, we'll arrange a site visit, and you can be introduced to Urban and Civic on site, and they can take you around and obviously discuss their thinking around the key phase, some of the issues and works they've been doing. So I think they could obviously make it a sort of a more rounded discussion, and we'll take you up onto site and show you obviously what is being proposed.
I would advise everyone to wear decent shoes. Don't wear heels. There's a lot of mud around that site. I've walked the site a few times, so yeah, wear some proper shoes. Are there any more questions?
Yes, Chair.
Carry on,
I feel
Councillor.
so bad because everyone's like... so I'm onto the report now. The planning strategy, the Tier 1 documents, is 3.2.1 on page 12. It's great to see that we're starting to get these come through after sitting on a number of mocks and kind of being informed that they're coming and then the next one they're informed that they're coming. So it's great they're actually forward now and signed off. Do we get oversight of those? Do we need to have oversight of those documents? And also, once they start building, is there a follow-up to ensure that they are sticking to these strategies, to these frameworks, rather than, you know, doing it as lip service, as kind of like, here's the document, and then, you know, only doing 5 mil instead of 10 mil of digging or whatever. You know, I'm not into building, so.
I'll respond to that, Chair. So the oversight is done by the Manydown Development Vehicle Board and Urban and Civic. So we do have oversight of what they're doing. It's a discharge of the Section 106, so we wouldn't expect to bring that back to this committee. I think the document that is probably pivotal that I would recommend bringing back will be the design code, because that design code is really what sets the parameters for the builders to build within, and will be really important and something that we will monitor both as a Manydown Overview Committee and part of MGC, but also the local planning authority will monitor. So that's probably the most important document. That's still being developed. I think it's nearly finished, so I'm hopeful to see something again in the next sort of 4 to 6 weeks as to being able to bring it back to a future meeting, and obviously explain how important that document is and how it's setting the tone for the development at Manydown.
And just to add, that design code is separate from the tier 1 to 3 documents that they have to follow in succession.
It comes within the tier. It comes as part of the tier 1 documents. So it's key that document actually gets signed off before they go to reserve matters on the key phases.
Thank you. Shall I just move straight on to on to 3.2.4 on page 13, it's giving us a bit of an update as to what the development manager has kind of been doing so far, and it talks about completed the preparatory work to remove and translocate hedgerows. Is there some additional hedgerows that they're preparing to move or remove? Because from my understanding, they've already removed the hedges along the Roman Road and the B3400. And do we know, as part of that work, how much of it was removed and how much has been moved to another location? And if any has been moved to a new location, where on the site? Because I've not seen any new bushes pop up along the site, and I'm sort of frequently up there.
Okay, so the works on the hedgerow, so the hedgerow down Roman Road, which was removed, could not be translocated, so that was just removed. The hedgerow that formed along the B3400 was then, the majority of that was translocated on the inverted F, which on this diagram is just going down this road. We've probably got to the first part, we got halfway down that track with the translocation, and we basically ran out of hedgerow. So there is some further ecology works that will need to be undertaken to complete the hedgerow running down to Pack Lane. So that work will probably take place in the autumn rather than being taken place now, because obviously the timing of the ecology. So I haven't got an actual quantum in terms of length that was taken and translocated, but again, I can ask the question because I think they've probably got that.
Please, that'd be great. So this is the last one, I promise, unless there's any follow-ups. And I hope that Rebecca and David aren't sat at home watching YouTube with us on, and I hope that they are drinking a gin or a wine somewhere in this weather. We've spoken sort of a number of times at these meetings around communication with the public. Now, we as a committee, or those that were on the committee last year, will know that the reasons why they're farming on the land now. However, I think it came as quite a surprise to a lot of the residents that live in Winklebury as to, well, all of a sudden there's this farming activity taking place. What's going on? You know, rumours start to fly, conspiracy theories start happening, and all of a sudden Manydown's not happening again. I I just think it'd be important that we do keep on this communication piece, and not it just appearing in a newspaper in the Gazette sort of weeks after it's happened. And I don't recall, and I don't know whether Abigail or Chair, whether you recall getting an email to inform us that this was going to be happening, because I certainly don't remember any email informing us that, you know, this is going to happen, the land drawdown, etc. We've granted a temporary licence to farm. It would have helped us quell any questions that are going on in Facebook groups. It's really key, this communication piece. And I know Urban and Civic and Rebecca has been really great. I just don't want it to sort of fall to the back of their mind as they're thinking of everything else that's coming forward.
So I think that point's very well made, and the first time many of us as members discovered it was when we read, if we don't live, which I don't live there, it was when we read the letter in the Gazette. So I think your point is extremely well made, Councillor Lee, and I think going forward I would very much hope that the communications that this new administration will issue will be much more comprehensive and much more inclusive, and your community is extremely important to us. And the proximity of your community and the other communities that surround the new development make it pivotal.
Councillor Compton-Burnett.
Thank you. It did come up in one of the mock meetings, but it might not have been. Yeah. But I totally agree with your point that communications are absolutely vital. Also that Rebecca's done a really good job at talking to communities, but I think it would be great if we could all sit down with her and work on a communication strategy, because we understand which Facebook groups work, which parish councils work, you know, so we know how a good way of organising communications from the point of view of the people that we know that live around us. So perhaps that's something that we could do together.
Again, I think that's a great idea. So I don't know who takes that forward, Chair. But if that could be on the actions, I think that's a fantastic idea, Councillor Compton-Burnett.
Yeah, Chair, just to confirm, we'll facilitate that meeting with Rebecca and those that require Urban and Civic.
Okay, anybody else, any other questions?
Please never apologise. I mean, the purpose of this meeting is to hear all the concerns that you have, that you wish to raise, that you wish to have noted actions. I think a lot of actions have come out of tonight. And, you know, we are a council of 54 councillors, and I'm absolutely indebted to those that bother to read the papers and those that wish to talk about them or ask questions about them. So that's please don't apologise.
I will second that. You should never apologise for questions. It helps inform everything we do. And if you aren't there nagging us, then, you know, we need keeping on our toes. Simple as. Okay, so if there are no other questions from officers, so before we move on to the work programme, so are we all happy with the recommendations in the report and to note the progress made on the Manydown programme? Thank you. Anything else I need to say?
Well, it might be useful to go through the actions that we've committed to.
Okay.
I don't know whether you want to do that.
Certainly, we can. Thank you. So, actions we have committed to so far tonight were to recommend a good look at traveller site provision to CEP or EPH.
Yep, confirm which one.
And for Andrew to open the dialogue with Urban and Civic regarding, now that's where my notes have gone. There's several things we wanted to chat to Urban and Civic about. Where are I? Anyone?
Do you want me to go through my list and if you want to add?
Yes, please. That would be very helpful. I shall learn to take better notes in future.
We're here to help. In terms of obviously wanting to look at the country park and the management strategy around the country park, obviously to feedback on the cost of ecology, etc., in terms of what's happened to date, and feed that back to the committee. Seek to have an HCC briefing on schools more generally within Basingstoke, and again we'll agree whether it's CEP or EPH. And obviously, whilst that'll be a wider briefing, it certainly will then pick up the issue of provision of schools within the Manydown sites. We would like an update from UNC around traveller sites in terms of what does the activity look like, and actually whether there's a need for us to come back through the new administration to check the previous discussions that have happened on that. Would like to have an understanding of how the travellers and sites will be managed, and obviously we can have a conversation with HCC in terms of any current thinking that can inform that. We'd like an update on employment opportunities and how they've progressed in terms of their conversations, obviously locally. We've noted that obviously there is a concern around the management of the country park itself. We will provide an update on the timeline of activity once the land, in terms of once the land's drawn down, and obviously, as Councillor Cuba has indicated, once we have an update on the land drawdown position, that will be communicated. We will look to arrange a site visit with the UNC during the summer period. Doesn't mean it's not going to rain. Obviously,
hopefully not muddy.
Not muddy. Would obviously like to have a discussion with Rebecca, particularly in terms of communications, and to have obviously had the opportunity to meet with her and possibly with David. And I think that's all I've noted. There were obviously a couple of other things.
Can I add to that? So if we could actually have Rebecca draft a communication strategy that will be seen by the committee, that'd be great. The ownership of the park is actually probably the most fundamental question. All the other questions about the park are probably less important, but it's the ownership of the park going forward. And more details on Hampshire County Council having an example of an exemplar traveller site and us reaching out to the travellers community ourselves. I think that was a point that Councillor Taylor made, which I think is very important. And I don't know, is there anything else anybody's aware of that's been left out of that list?
Transport, the public, discussing public transport, we were going to ask for.
So there's going to be a paper that's going to EPH, which Councillor Asfield is going to be chairing, and that's going to look into the connectivity with Winkle Green.
Yes.
But that's not an action for our committee.
No.
Sorry, I may have missed the piece on the bridge.
Microphone?
Train crossing.
Train crossing, yes, sorry, yes.
Yeah.
No. The foot crossing across.
Cycle bridge.
Oh,
Cycle bridge that goes across the dual carriageway.
Is that from like Winkle
From the football pitch to Howe Mills.
Over to Fifes, yeah.
So are we expecting a brief? Sorry, Chairman. Are we expecting a briefing for that, or
Just an update as to
Update,
what
yeah.
HCC's
Current thinking.
intentions are, whether they're going to go with us.
Yeah.
Can a site visit include chats, but also perhaps
Microphone?
Old Down, because that's obviously a topic that's important to, but there was also perhaps understanding the A30 and the connection, and I think it just, in terms of the site visit, I just think it would help us to help me to visualise certainly some of these challenges.
Councillor Ashwell, I think it's a great idea, the site visit, just personally, because it's such a vast, we're talking 2,000 hectares, right? So I would have thought we need to actually bite-size this. I don't know what the officer's recommendations would be to the Cabinet, but I personally think that we should focus on the north in the short term. And then we could have another site visit after that to contextualise the other, the South Manydown, because the South Manydown isn't even in a plan at the moment. It's conceptual. I don't know whether would you agree with that, Sue?
So yeah, absolutely. I would suggest we do the main site and then have a discussion about any additional sites you might want to do on separate occasions.
Right, everyone happy with everything? Everything covered?
You've chaired it beautifully.
Thank you. Well, we need to go and review the work programme next. So I know I did have a couple of things I was wanting to add with a view to the green, sort of eco-friendly, and making. I know we've spoken about several times here, and it also appears in the statement here that we want to make this as eco-friendly as possible. So I would like to add into the work programme to engage with Greener Basingstoke and also the Greater South East Net Zero Hub, with a view to asking them how we can make Manydown as environmentally friendly as possible, and maybe consider it as like try and push for an exemplar site, so that we are leading the way with Manydown in green technology, in green infrastructure matters and EV things like that. So.
So, Chair, I think that's a great idea. I think it's really important. I think all 54 of us are wedded to and committed to the green agenda. I think it might be better, because I haven't even seen the urban design yet. And I think what we need to have is that piece of work that we can all digest, and that they can digest, because then they can add their halfpenny's worth. Is that a good idea, officers?
Yeah.
So I think it's great to have it on the programme, but I think the sequencing should be that we should have the urban design code and the plans for what these, what we're hoping it's going to look, the cohesive theme and thread. And Sue's then added that it would be extremely useful if we could have urban and civic there as well. So it's about sequencing, but I think it's a great idea, and I absolutely really value and look forward to hearing what their views are and advice is.
No, it's just, I'd say, work in progress, and to get their opinions on things. I was talking to a representative from the Greater South East Net Zero Hub, and they've given me a lot of information about the Future Home Standard, which is coming in 2025, and the need to adhere to that sooner rather than later. And I do think that, you know, we declared a climate emergency. I know we've got a lot of issues, and we really need to get shifting with this. We haven't got a lot of time left. 2030 is very, very close now. 7 years, and you know we were supposed to be aiming for net zero by then. So I do think that somewhere like Manydown is somewhere we could actually make a difference with this.
I agree. I agree completely, Chair.
Did anyone else have anything they wanted to query with the work programme or add to it at all? No? Are we all happy to agree the current work programme in the agenda? Excellent. So I think, because we don't have any confidential items, I think that's it, isn't it? Excellent. Well, thank you all very much, and thank you for being so lovely, and we will see you next time. In future, if there's anything you do want to chat about, if you've got ideas, please come and see me or Andrew or Annalie. We are open to ideas. We want to make a team of this and do what's best for all the residents of Basingstoke with Manydown.
And thank you to the officers.
Oh, indeed. Thank you to the officers. I'd be lost without these wonderful people. They do all the hard work. I just sit here and talk. They do all the hard work. So many, many thanks to all the officers involved.